muscles.
Hello everyone, that was Melody's very, very hard-fought attempt at saying Dia de los Muertos, and that is the theme of today's design. It is a sugar skull that has a crown of roses, some little crystals around the outside, a really pretty gradient in the background, and then, like I said, a sugar skull front and center. If you love sugar skulls and the Day of the Dead, I have a couple past videos and I will put links to those in the description box below. The one from last year is extreme, it's sculpted, it is so beautiful. I would especially recommend you give it a check on that one if you did not see it a year ago. Otherwise, I hope you guys like this design and I'll see you next time. Bye!
Bye.
We are going to begin by creating an ombre of a glittery purple into a glittery blue. And if you guys are curious about that purple, I actually mixed it live in one of my live classes, the one about using loose glitter. So if you want to see how I mixed that particular color, I can put a link to that video in the description box below. But otherwise, we have just a very smooth ombre, purple to blue. It pretty much gets covered up in this particular design, but if you were to create that ombre across the other nails, it would go together so well and it would look so pretty. After you have the ombre done, I do recommend encapsulating, especially since this is a glitter ombre. It just doubles the protection to make sure your ombre stays as gorgeous as it does right when you first sculpted it. Then file the nail into shape with your e-file or hand file or whatever your personal process is, and then we're going to be sculpting our skull with some white acrylic. Lay down a circle of white acrylic and then using your dotting tool, poke into the white acrylic to carve out the eye sockets. Then using your dotting tool, you may want to wipe it off or switch to a brush too. You can carve in the nasal cavities. I actually used both dotting tool and brush. Look at that. See, sometimes I forget what I do myself. And then after you have that done, try to keep things round and soft, more so than you may otherwise, because this whole skull is going to be painted. And so the more texture that ends up in it, the more difficult it will be to paint. We're going to be doing, after that upper portion of the cranium is done, we're going to do the upper and lower mandibles. So lay down another bead, kind of press it into that general jaw shape, and then using the tip of your small 3D acrylic brush, you're going to want to carve in the jaw and the teeth. Then use a little more white acrylic to blend everything together that needs to be smoothed out. Again, the smoother you make things, the easier it will be to sculpt. That's not to say you don't want some texture and detail. It's just be mindful that you want to blend things out maybe a little more than you do otherwise. I'm also going to be adding those nice little cheekbones. We want it to look like a fairly anatomically correct skull while keeping it softer. So yeah, there you have it. I'm going to fill in the eyes with just a little bit more white acrylic just to give them, again, a little smoother appearance on the inside. I'm going to smooth out the area around the eye sockets. I like to usually add a fairly big ridge on the eye sockets. This time I am not going to. And then once we have our skull done and you're happy with it, you can go to a nail form backing and we're going to be sculpting 3 roses, 2 pink and 1 orange. Do not do the same color of your roses that you did for the background color. So say you did a pink and orange background behind your skull, do a different color for your little roses. So do colors that go together. I'm going to be directing you guys to all of my live classes here. If you are somebody that struggles with color theory and picking colors that go together, I do have a color theory live class that will go through everything, and it goes through basically my entire thought process when I'm picking out colors, which is rather, I guess it was more than I thought it was because I have rapid fire thoughts that go through my head. But if you want to hear me try to articulate said rapid fire thoughts, I would direct you to that live class as well. Since I'm on the topic, if you guys are interested in any of my live classes, future or past, I would recommend that you go and you send me an email to hotpinkzebrapolish@hotmail.com. I can put that email in the description box, and then you will be on my email list for any future live classes. I do one a month. They are on the 3rd Thursday of the month, and if you're part of that live class, then you get information ahead of time. So it's any reference photos that may be beneficial to the class, as well as just a supply list, what's going to be discussed on the class, and then it's a reminder too. So if you want to be in the loop for those, I would highly recommend just getting on that list. It's a nice little group, and I won't bug you, I promise. It's 2 emails a month. But otherwise, we've got our first pink rose. Then we're going to be sculpting an orange one. When I sculpt these little roses, I like to start out with a long, kind of a hot dog shape, or like a slightly more like a lima bean, I suppose, if you want to go for food. Slightly curved, long shape. And then after I have that done, I like to stand it on end after I've rolled it up, and I sculpt petals in groups of 3. Relatively small, especially if you're making tiny roses like this. Make them as small as you possibly can. Those little beads of acrylic. Pat them out flat. Once they can be picked up, as soon as they can be picked up, pick them up and stick them to your rose. When you're all done sculpting these roses, you're going to want to glue them right to the crown of the skull. So you're going to first glue down whatever is the color you have one of. So for me, that's one orange. And then I'm going to put my pinks on either side of that. Glue them in place with your nail glue. For me, I just like to do a small amount of nail glue because it dries a little quicker, holds a little faster. And then to really secure them in place, I like to fill in behind them with some clear acrylic or the color that they are. So you can use either one. If you do use clear acrylic, it won't fill in any gaps if your rose isn't sitting flat to the nail. If it is sitting flat to the nail, that works fantastic. For me, mine were tipped just a little bit, so I used their colors to fill in that area. Now, using gel paints, this is kind of one of those it's up to you scenarios. I would either recommend using gel paints that match your roses or gel paints that match your background. Or if you really want to go all out on this, both. So for me, I went with gel paints that are complementary to my flowers. So I'm going to do orange and pink for the majority of my gel painting that's in color. I did add in just a smidge of green to do some leaves, but other than that, I'm going to stick with basically those two colors. And I'm going to just kind of fill in with some flowers, some different swirls, different patterns. If you are wanting to see some inspiration for sugar skulls, there is so much just beautiful art that you can see on the internet. So either look up Dia de los Muertos artwork or sugar skulls or Day of the Dead art. Any of that stuff, you will be rewarded with so many beautiful pieces of art. So if you are looking for some inspiration and you don't want to do it exactly like mine because, we want to, switch things up and do them our own way, certainly look at that. Otherwise, if you guys are looking for a Dia de los Muertos design that's a little bit more out there, a little bit more crazy, extreme, lots of painting into it, I have a design that I did a year ago that's actually the first of my extreme sculpted nails, and it was before I had my practice finger, so I did it on myself, which is legitimately way more fun than using a practice finger, doing it on yourself, but it's a little bit more time consuming. Or I guess not time, I just have to not have anything else on my nails, but otherwise that's really fun, and I would definitely recommend that video. And so once we have our pink and orange done, I'm going to go through, like I said, and add just a couple green little lines for leaves. And all of the gel paints I'm using are the ones from Madam Glam that do not require top coat. So the great thing with this is if I'm not doing any acrylic painting on this design, which I'm not, I don't have to top coat it unless I want to. So the background I will end up top coating, and you'll see that in a moment, but the little designs I'm painting on the sugar skull require no top coat. So the white acrylic that's going to show through is matte without applying anything to it, and it doesn't need to have anything applied to it. And then all of this gel paint is very glossy, so you have a matte and glossy contrast that makes all of the painting show up even more, and you don't have to worry about top coating it, which doesn't add any bulk or fill in any of the details of your 3D sculpting. It's just a win-win scenario. So I would recommend, whether you use that gel paint or a different one, to use something that does not require top coat. I'm going to, now that I have all the colorful stuff done, I'm going to go through and do some black outlines. Depending on the sugar skull you look at, it's, some do have black outlines, some don't. Most of the time when it's like an art rendition, especially if it's a cartoony style and not like a very beautiful oil painting per se, then they do have the outlines. So the more artsy, realistic ones don't. The more cutesy ones, kind of, I guess, if that's the right word for it, do have the black outlines. And I think in this particular design, it looks really nice, especially with the bright white skull and just this shiny, glossy gel paint. It just looks really nice to have the black outlines. It shows up a little bit better for everything. It is kind of a time-consuming thing, and you have to be careful not to put a line where you don't want it because it won't wipe off very cleanly from the raw white acrylic that you're painting on top of. So you just have to be kind of careful with it. And if you feel confident enough in your skills, I would recommend doing the black outlines. If you're a little bit like, I'm going to make this a little easier on myself, skip it, and it's not a problem. So keep doing all of this. Fill in the black with as many details as you want. For me, I also wanted to go through and define things that are part of the anatomy of the skull, like the teeth and the nasal passages, and fill in the eye sockets. All of that can be done with the black gel paint. If you aren't very used to using black gel paint, or any gel paint for that matter, painting on top of the surface of the skull, since it is just acrylic that hasn't been filed or sealed in any way, is going to be slightly difficult, just more so than normal. So if that is something you've never done, take it slow. And you may find you'd rather just do all of this with acrylic paint and then top coat it and forego the matte glossy contrast, which is perfectly fine. Completely up to you. Whatever works the best is what you should go with in your circumstance. So just do all the details you want to fill in. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be outlining those little flower petal shapes I went with around the eye sockets. Doing that particular little outline was one I wasn't really looking forward to. Just a whole bunch of small lines that I needed to be very, very thin. And once you have all of those done though, it is so beautiful. And I'm going to just finish up with a little bit more glam. So I'm going to apply some jewelry gel right kind of in the space above and below my skull, fill it in. It's almost the entire nail. And then apply some gel top coat over all of that jewelry gel, making sure to fully cap it so it doesn't end up staying sticky. And then after that's done, I'm going to be pressing some rhinestones into that wet jewelry gel. Like I said, extra glamorous and sparkly and fun. There's just something about doing a sugar skull that to me requires having some rhinestones or crystals. Completely up to you though, whether you want to fill that in, that space in with them or not. Again, if you're doing multiple nails with a Dia de los Muertos design, you could split up some of the themes that I put into this design onto multiple nails, so you could have a lot of fun with it and do some crystals on one, maybe put the 3D flowers on a different one, and do some of the little artsy elements of the sugar skull on different ones. You could just have, a lot of fun with it. But I hope you guys love this design as much as I do. I will put all those links I mentioned in the description box below, and if I don't, make sure you hassle me in the comment section so I do it. And otherwise, I will see you guys next time. Bye!